All right, so before we get started with 7.1, I guess part 2, let's just recap yesterday, okay? Few things, Hansi. First thing, we talked about the square root of a negative number. The square root of a negative number was I. It involved I somehow, right? So we said that the square root of -1 was I. We started viewing numbers like the square root of -4 as the square root of 4 times the square root of -1. So that square root of -1 was I, and the square root of 4 was 2. Sort of okay? Okay, then we were talking about how to rewrite radicals and deal with that. Okay, that was this whole part in here. Basically, the way we rewrite radicals, okay, is we write it as an exponent. So it rotates up. That's why I was kind of telling you, your thumb goes on the number outside the square root, and your index finger, your pointer finger, goes on the power of the number, and it rotates up, okay? So for example, if I have, let's say, the cube root of, say, x squared, I'd put my thumb on the 3 and my index finger on the 2, and it would rotate up to give me x to the 2/3. Okay. If I want to move it back into this format of a radical, I put my thumb on the denominator and my index finger on the numerator, and it rotates down. Okay, do you guys see that? All right, Julia, do you see that? Okay, why do I want to kind of know these formats? Because depending on the format, it might be easier for me to deal with a problem. So Lance, we were talking about some of these problems yesterday, right? Now, we talked about how cube roots and cubing, they kind of undo each other, right? Okay, kind of like multiplication and division, addition and subtraction. But we can really understand that if instead of just trying to compute it, we view it as a rational exponent. So the cube root of 4 cubed, obviously, we could talk about that as the cube root of 64. We could type that in our calculator and see it as 4. But if we kind of view this as a rational exponent and rotate it up, a would become 4 to the 3 over 3. And we know 3 divided by 3 is 1, so this just becomes 4 to the 1st. Okay, which would justify our answer as what is the cube root of 64? Kind of makes sense a little bit. So that's just one format that might be easier for me to deal with rational exponents in, is when I'm dealing with a lot of different things. Okay, Jake.
So basically, it's like
Correct. Different situations, I want to use a different club. Occasionally, I might want to use the radical club. Occasionally, I might want to use the exponents club. Okay. It depends on what I feel more comfortable with. Okay. So we talked about that. And we talked about simplifying radicals. Okay. Now, if we kind of focus in on A again from yesterday, we have 8 to the 4/3. Why would I want to deal with it in 8 to the 4/3 opposed to the cube root of 8 to the 4th? Well, I asked myself this, Leah. Leah, how many times does 3 go into 4? 1 time. So I could rewrite 8 to the 4/3 is 8 times 8 to the 1/3. Okay. Where did I get it? Well, 3 went into 4 1 time. That's where that 8 to the 1st came from. What was left was 1/3. So that's where 8 to the 1/3 is. To evaluate it, I know what the cube root or 8 to the 1/3 is. That's 2. I could evaluate that easily as 16. Now, if I didn't have that, well, then guess what? I would have to do 8 to the 4th. 8 times 8 is 64. 64 times 64 is, ooh, big number. Let's see. It's probably going to be 5,000. No, it's 4,104. What is it? Okay, good for you. Glad you have a calculator. Feel good about yourself? Like when you wore spikes to our race? It's nice.
Ridiculous.
Ridiculous. All right. So, but do you see what I mean? It's really difficult to do that. And then what's the cube root of 4,196 or whatever it was? Do you see what I'm saying? That's really difficult. All right. Also, other formats, like in this format with rational exponents, I have 4 squared to the 3 halves. Well, I multiply the exponents, right? When you have a power raised to a power, okay, I have the square and the 3 halves. Well, 2 times 3 half, the 2's would cancel. I'm left with 3. So it would be 4 to the 3rd, which I know is what, 64? So it's a little easier for me to compute. Also, when we were going over these yesterday, you know, we didn't get to all of them, all right? So we'll pick up here. So it says, rewrite each expression using rational exponents, all right? Here, let's talk about the 4th root of x cubed. I would rotate that up. This piece right here would become x to the 3/4. Chris, do you see where I got that from? I put my thumb on the 4 and the 3, had my index finger, and I rotated up 3/4. Jay Patel at home, are you with me?
Yeah, I'm with you.
Okay. Now outside, we have this x. It has an exponent of 1. What is 1 plus 3/4? Because when we have a power times a power, we add, right? 1 plus 3/4 is 1 3/4, which is 7/4. Are we okay with that? Ms. Boswick, we okay? You can say no if you're not. All right. All right. B, I know this is tough to see, so I'll rewrite it. We have the cube root of x squared over the square root of x cubed. Dividing these out, I don't know what it is. I can't do that, right? I can't write it as a single power of x. It's not possible. So what I can do is I can rewrite these as rational exponents, right? So the numerator, my thumb is on the 3, my pointer finger is on the 2. That rotates up to x to the 2/3. Over. Do the same thing here. Well, it's understood that there's a 2 out in front of the square root. So that becomes 3 halves. It's understood. It's the square root. Okay. Nikki Grantland, what do I do when I'm dividing powers? When I multiplied, I added. When I divide, I subtract. So on your calculator, can you do 2/3 minus 3 halves? 2/3 minus 3 halves. Hit math. Enter, enter. Yeah, the first one's frac. What did you get? It's difficult, like beating the final boss in Double Dragons.
I got a syntax error.
It's because you used the wrong subtraction button. Yeah, I know. Yeah. 2/3 minus 3 halves. Yeah. What do you get?
-5/6.
Is that what we got yesterday? -5/6. Okay.
Yeah.
So you can use your calculator to kind of compute this. Now, instead of having it all jumbled like this whole thing simplifies to x equal or x to the negative 5/6. Over here, okay, in C, we didn't do C yesterday, Carolina, did we? Okay, with C, all right, we're going to rotate that up, okay? It's going to be this inside the whole thing. Okay, if I rotate it up, I can kind of view it two ways. I can view it as one whole thing. All right, this whole thing is to the first power, so I could write it as x squared y to the 1/3. Okay. If you don't like that, I could rotate it up individually both times. So I could rotate it up with the x's, that would be x to the 2/3 and y to the 1/3. Okay. But how did what I wrote at the beginning, the x squared y to the 1/3, become this? How are these two the same? Well, if I do 1/3 times 2, that's 2/3, and 1/3 times 1, that's 1/3. All right. See how I convert between them? Chris, you okay? Feeling a little bit better about this stuff? Not much though, but a little bit better. Carolina feeling a little bit better. Julia, a little bit better. Okay. So my preferred, I don't like the square roots. I'm not a big fan of it. I use it when I'm trying to compute numbers, like figure it out. I kind of write it that way. And then I move quickly out of that form because up here, this looks cleaner to me. And I can enter that in on my calculator a lot easier. Like if I had to do the 5th root of something, your calculator doesn't have a button for that, but it has a caret button. I could type it in as like the 5th root of 8 and I could figure it out. All right. So here, use the rules to simplify the expression. All right, let's look at I. We have the square root of the cube root of x. The problem with this is there is no button for that, Nikki Grantland. There is no button, okay? But I need to figure this out. This could be an SAT question, all right? It could be on your college entrance exam. It could be somewhere, all right? And you need to come up with a value for this. So how do I do it? Well, first, start here. It's simple. Kailana, could you rewrite that, the cube root of x, as a rational exponent? What would that be? What was that? Not 3/2. Remember, your thumb goes on the 3, and then what exponent is here with the x? 1, so it'd be 1/3. Are you okay with that? Because when there's not a number outside, it's understood because the square root, okay, is understood to be like 2. And then earlier on, the reason it was with the x was because the x had an exponent of 2. So that's why it was like 2/3, because the x already had an exponent of 2. Here, the exponent of x is 1. So it's 1/3. Now, let's bring this piece back in. All right, that's a square root, right? Agreed, Lance? It's a square root. The number here, as I said, is understood to be a 2, correct? Well, now I kind of like rotate it up, right? So if I rotate this up, just what we did, we have x to the 1/3 over 2. It looks kind of funky, right? Lance, I know you got your calculator. Can you do 1/3 divided by 2? Then can you make a math? Enter, enter. Are you okay with that? And it kind of makes sense, right? If I'm taking the square root of a cube root, it kind of makes sense to be like a sixth root. Okay? All right, B. Let's go ahead and rewrite B. And I'm just rewriting these because these are really blurry video. Like it's really tough to see. 2x minus 1 to the 4/3 over the cube root of 2x minus 1. Now, Leah, I'm going to view that 2x minus 1 as a whole thing because of that minus sign. Okay? So when I rotate this up, the cube root of 2x minus 1, that's going to be 2x minus 1. That exponent right there is a 1. So this is going to be 1/3. Are we okay with that? Hansi, we okay with that? Justin at home, are we okay with that?
Yes.
Amelia? You okay with that? You can just type in the chat, yes. Ed, are you okay with that? Ed? Okay, good talk, Ed.
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't.
Me and my dad, Ed talking. All right, so now we have 2x minus 1 to the 4/3. That was on top. And now what do I do with those exponents? Let's go to Laura. What do I do with those exponents? All right. Nikki Grantland, subtract 4/3 over 1/3. Let me see what Laura said. Okay, we're not going to multiply them because it's not a power raised to a power. So what we're going to do is we're going to subtract them because a power divided by a power, all right, we subtract. A power times a power, we multiply. Or not multiply, we add. And a power raised to a power, we multiply. So here we're going to do 4/3 minus 1/3. Do we happen to know what that is?
3/3.
Which is?
1.
So my answer is just 2x minus 1. All right. Now I know yesterday was rough. Do we feel better about this today? A little bit better? We're getting there. Okay.
Why don't you divide the 2x minus 1 by 2?
Because it's like a variable. Okay. So you have to view 2x minus 1 as like a whole variable. So when we divide like exponents, we have like x to the 3rd over x squared. We don't say the x's cancel and we're just left with like 1, right? What it means is we have like 3 x's on top and 2 x's on bottom, and you know, one set of x's cancel and then another set of x's cancel. You're left with one x left over. Same thing with that one. Okay. All right, so here's some calculator work for you. So hopefully you guys got it. The first one I'm going to write up here says the square root of 5. Remember, rounding 3 decimal places. Number 2, I believe that looks like a 5 to me. The 5th root of 25. C says the cube root of -4. And the last one says -1.4 to the 3/2. Jake, calculator.
I don't have. I have a pencil though.
You're bound to have one less, man. Because I knew somebody, his name was Big Jevons. He didn't have a calculator? Oh, shit. This was Big Jevons. You know how somebody is this calculator? No, he's lucky. I didn't touch
He
him.
doesn't have a pencil either. Right now, he doesn't have a pencil.
Oh. That was crazy. This one? Name of the game. Dude, that thing like tore me open. All right. See? Yes. All right. All right, so I think we've had enough time to type these in. What is the square root of 5? Okay, square root of 5 should be 2 point something. I believe it's like 2.36. But here's the problem with that answer, Carolina. It says 3 decimal places. All right. So biggest issue, okay, sometimes when I've been working with people is they haven't been correctly grounded. So Carolina, can you type in on your calculator the square root of 5? So 2.236, right? Now, Carolina, you said something about the next number. The next number was what? 0, right? So that is rounded down, right, to 2.36, right? Is that what you said? Oh, my bad. I thought you said 2.36. There's like, oh, we need 3 decimal places. So, Kailana, sorry about that. Then you are right. So it's 2.236 approximately. And that's what those squiggly lines mean. All right. B. How do we type in B? There is no 5th root button, right? So Lance, what did you first do with this? The little finger thingy, right? So you wrote it as 25 to the what? Very good. And you do have a caret button, correct?
Yeah.
So what is the 5th root of 25? $1.904. They did?
Yeah, look at this.
Hey, good for you.
Press math, you go down to the like 3, whatever. Press that, go over to the 3, and press 5.
1.904.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Lance, you hesitated for a second because it was 1.903 and then it was 6, right? And that 6 rounded it up to the 4. And Hansi is right. There is buttons for it. But Hansi, that took you a little bit, right? Isn't it pretty easy just to rotate that up and raise 25 to the 1/5? Okay. Now, how do I do the cube root of -4? Well, hopefully, yes. Unreal, Jake. Oh, all right, Julia. With the -4, this is really important. What do I have to make sure I do? Put it in, starts with a P, ends in parentheses. Yeah, we gotta put it in parentheses. there is like an issue when people don't put it in parentheses, it's gonna spit out a different answer. So Julia, can I watch you type in -4 in parentheses? And then we're gonna raise that, so we're gonna hit the caret button. Right, so caret button, so delete. Okay, yeah, so you know that one. And then we're gonna type it to the 1/3. You guys got all fancy buttons now. And just hit enter. And what did you get? And it's -1.587 because there was a 4 after the 7, which rounds down. Now, with this one, Hansi, there's no button for that, right? So what I have to do here is I got to figure out how to type that in. And Leah, obviously the -1.4 is in parentheses, right? So let me see you type it in. Just making sure you're able to type it in. You got an error. Well, because it looks like you have 2. So let's just you got it twice. Okay. Now we got an error. Now, why might we get an error on this? Well, this is when it might be beneficial to see it in the other one. An error is correct. Lance, why do you think we got an error here? Not a real number, right? So we know, all right, we can deal with this now. Now, here's why, Leah, we can't just type it in on the calculator. If we rotate that down, right, it's the square root of -1.4, right? We can't take the square root of a negative number, right, on the calculator, but we can in real life, correct? What do we have to add? We talked about at the beginning. What do I have to add, like at the end? An odd. So if we do 1.4 to the 3/2, right, and then just toss an I on the end, we're going to be okay with that, right? So, Leah, can you do that for me? Yeah, can you do 1.4 to the 3/2? Yep, positive 1.4. Okay, hold on. So we're actually going to view this like this, Leah. All right, so we're going to deal with that, which is what? What did you get? 1.657. And we know -1 cubed is -1. And the square root of -1 is I. So that's where we get it from. Are you okay with that now? All right. So whenever we have something where we get an error from, chances are it's because, hey, we're dealing with a negative square root, like 4th root. You can't take the 4th root of a negative number. It doesn't work out. Okay, it's for the same reason it doesn't work out for a square root. All right. Let's talk about evaluating. Jay Patel, what does evaluate mean?
Simplify.
Simplify. Okay, so I'm going to simplify these expressions for when x is 4. So I'm going to take 4 and I'm going to plug it in, and we're going to see what I got. So f of x equals the cube root of x minus 31 for a. So f of 4, I'm just going to replace x with a 4. Jay, what is 4 minus 27? Yeah, you gave me the
Negative 23.
Yeah, my bad. 4 minus 31 is 27. That's what I meant to say. It's negative 27. So what is the cube root of negative 27? You can type that in on your calculator. And we got this rotated up. So I would type in parentheses, -27, parentheses, the caret button to the 1/3. Yeah, you gotta put it in parentheses. The 1/3. Parentheses, yep, 1/3. Like that. So we get f of 4 is -3. Now for b, that says g of x, so we have g of x or g of 4 equals the square root of 16 minus 3 times 4. Well, 3 times 4 is what, Jake Stevens? And 16 minus 12 is what, Jake Stevens? What's the square root of 4? Thank you. And I didn't put a plus or minus, so I just want the answer of 2. All right, let me see what this next little bit is. All right, we'll talk about that tomorrow. Not gonna rush through it. All right, so I'll be putting up the web assign for this. We'll finish up the domain tomorrow, recap everything, and then move on to 7.2.